Okay, today we're going to be making a loaf of French bread. And the first step I'm going to be taking is I need to proof my yeast. Now I know my yeast is good because I keep it in the refrigerator in a jar, but I'm going to go ahead and proof it anyway. And so I'm just, right now I'm checking the temperature of my water. And I want my water to be around 115 degrees at the highest. Right now I'm showing 117 degrees. I'm going to come out of there, turn off my gauge. Now this is just a little meter that I bought for keeping up with my fish tank or your swimming pool or anything where you want to keep your water safe. And it's for checking parts per million and temperature. So right now I'm going to go ahead and put it in there. You see that bottom number. That bottom number is showing it's going up 113, 114. Stopping right at about 114, 115. Now it's probably going to residually go up just a little higher, but that's where I want it. So 115 degrees on my water is perfect, actually. So now that would just be warm to the touch. You know, it wouldn't burn you, but it would be warm to the touch. We put that immediate way so it doesn't get messed up. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put what we're going to be using in our recipe today. I'm going to be using 1.5 teaspoons of salt. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save that to last. Some people go ahead and put it in. I like to save it to last. Now I'm going to be using honey instead of two tablespoons of sugar. I'm going to be using 2 tablespoons of honey. I bought my honey from a guy in Tennessee, and it's just he calls his name. Hello, my name is Burles Davis from Findlay, Tennessee. And I'm not trying to promote it or anything. I'm just saying I've had it for a while. It's really, really good honey. I just like to get a little bit of it every now and then on a spoon. So much for my diabetes, right? All right, I'm going to go ahead and put this honey in this warm water because I want it to dissolve in there. It's a little bit cold. It's going to lower the temperature of the water just a little bit, but not enough, I don't think, to hurt it. It can get down to 105. That's why I like to start with it right at 115, so that when I add the honey and it lowers the temperature slightly, it's not going to be detrimental to it. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and make sure that honey gets blended in that water real well. Here's a little hint, a little tip for you. What's the oldest solvent in the world, known to the world? The oldest solvent. Solvent is something that dissolves something else or it breaks it down a little bit. And of course, that would be water. Water is the oldest solvent. Okay. Now, we're going to go ahead and add 1.5. Let me see, what was that? 1.5 teaspoons of active dry yeast. Now, you know, you could be having instant or rapid or whatever. It depends on what you want to use. With rapid, you wouldn't have to use hot water, but you'd have to let it sit. So I'm going to go ahead and pour in that 1.5 teaspoons of yeast, okay, into 2 tablespoons of honey and 1.25 cups of warm water, 115 degrees if you can measure it, or at least really hot to touch. I want to try to get all that yeast out of there. Okay. Now, as you can see, I took them. I keep my honey in the refrigerator normally, so it makes it. When you put it in the water, it's going to cool the water down a little bit. But I can already tell with that honey in that water and that yeast in there, it's already starting to act. I'm telling you, look at that, boy. I like to mix it really good. You know, you're not going to hurt the yeast. I just want to make sure that honey gets broken down really good, and then it's going to make that yeast just climb out of the measuring cup. Man, I'm telling you. It's trying to climb out of there right now. I'm going to get all the yeast off my whisk. Make sure all the yeast particles are nice and broken up. It's a good way to start a recipe right here, making sure that yeast is mixed in good with that honey. Okay. Now, to review, I got a cup and 1 1/4 cups of warm water, 115 degrees. I've got 1 1/2 teaspoons of active dry yeast. I've got 2 tablespoons of honey mixed in with that. I'm going to let that sit for just a minute. Let that, I can see that the active's already going to work in that warm water with that honey inside that, in that water. That yeast is going to town. Now, I've got my flour here, and I'm going to take my whisk. I've got 3 cups of here. I'm going to be using 3 1/2 cups of all-purpose flour. All-purpose flour is fine for this recipe. I normally use bread flour, but I tried it last time with bread flour, and it was okay. But I'm trying to learn a new procedure here, and it's French bread has been a little more difficult for me than the other breads have been. I'm going to try this one, a new recipe, and just hope it works out for me. I'm not going to knead it quite as long, and I'm not going to work the dough as much. Now I'm going to hold off on this salt. Now this is, let me see, what is that calling for? This is 2 teaspoons of salt right here. Okay? It's supposed to be 2 teaspoons of salt, but I cut it down to about 1 1/2. I don't want that much salt in my bread. My blood pressure's high. And the honey is better for me than sugar, so that's why I'm using honey instead. It won't change the recipe that much, but you got to have some salt in your bread or you won't have any flavor. And too much salt and it won't rise. So we're going to be really we're going to try again, as always, not to overwork the dough, and we're not going to try to put any more flour in. I'm using 3 1/2 cups of flour. I have a 1/2 cup sitting over here, right over here on the side, in case I need to use it to add to the 3 cups that I have. I'm going to add the water, and then if I need more flour, I'll put more in. I can see already that the yeast is going to town over here. You see that yeast forming that froth on there? That means that yeast is ready to go. That water is the right temperature. Even the honey didn't slow it down. So we're going to have a good rise, it looks like. Okay? All right, I'm going to start working this in. Now I know this is my liquid mixture is set, so it'll be the flour that I'll need to adjust as this recipe advances through. Okay? I'm going to start out with just my little rubber mixer here. Now I'm going to put I'm not even going to put the salt in just yet. I'm going to get my flour off the side and just get the sponge in the middle, they call it. That's the working part of it. Just make that little sponge in the middle. Just get that flour mixed in there good. Let that water come on in. Don't want to overwork my dough. Are you saying, boy, is he going to ever put that salt in there? I am. I just want my dough to get a little bit better mixed up. See, I want a kind of a blend like that. Now, what I'll do, get that to get over there some. Oh, this is going to be a good mix. Now I'm going to put the salt in. I'm going to sprinkle it around real good, because my yeast is already going to work. Okay? Now, that takes care of all the ingredients. Now we're just going to work the dough around the bowl, just like if we were in a mixer. And all it would be doing is just turning the dough around, just like that. Now I'm going to turn this out on my board here in just a minute. I don't think I'm going to need much more flour, but once I start handling it some, see, you can see now my hands are nice and clean. I always start with my hands washed for a minute under hot water with some really good antibacterial soap. I don't want any bacteria getting in my bread. You know. Now this is probably going to be wet to the touch, but I'll tell you what, boy, that is a good looking batch of dough. I can handle that already. No, I can. Might not even turn that on the board. I like the way that's looking right here in the bowl. I think where I've made my mistake with my French bread in the past, I overwork my dough every time. I don't want to do that this time. Now we're only going to let this dough sit up for 30 minutes. We want it to rise for 30 minutes. I'm not going to do a thing to this bowl because I got plenty of flour in here. Might flour a little bit at the bottom. I see it's still sticking a little down there on the bottom. So that means our dough now is starting to show some of its wetness, but that's okay. It ain't not that wet. We can handle that when we pour this out of the bowl. And I am going to put some more of that flour around it because it will stick if I don't. I'm going to try to get it out of there. That's that other half I was telling you that was in there. That'll make it so that I can get it out of the bowl. It'll absorb this flour, believe me, it will. Most of it that I have down there laying around the bottom of it and stuff. Now, in other recipes, I've oiled the bowl, I've oiled the ball and the whole bit, but I'm not doing that with this recipe. I'm just leaving some of this flour that was meant for it. It's gonna be, when I turn it out on the board, it'll get combined into it. But you can see right there. That's, ooh man, that looks good. It's nice and warm to the touch too. So we're just gonna, like I say, we're just gonna let that rise. Okay, we're back and we're ready to get started on our bread. We're going to take it out of the oven and make sure that it's risen properly. And hey, Bonnie Lass, what you doing, my little puppy sitting in the doorway looking at me? Come on in, girl. Come on. You can watch. Come over here and watch me. I'll grab you a treat in a minute. Okay. You can see that our dough has soaked up all that flour that was on top of it. And it's looking real good. Got a little moisture on the top. So I'm going to go ahead and take the dough out. We're doing this so that the dough is forming as we're doing the process. Normally, I think I've just been overworking the dough in between when I first mix it and before the first rise and even after the second. Now this time we're going to take it out. We're going to push it down and we're going to form it, roll it out and form it into the loaf, and then we'll let it rise again. Now, it's fine to the touch. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to flour my hands right above it, and that's going to put a little flour on the top. So the main thing I don't want to do is I don't want to have too much flour put on this bread. Flour that's in it is all I need. This is all the flour that I have out of that 3.5 cups that's left. And that's how much flour I want to use just to incorporate, to get it out and make sure that it's fine. Now I'm gonna take my homemade sifter here, duster, and dust my top, my marble board. I love working on marble because it grabs the dough. It doesn't make it stick as bad, it seems. But it grabs it, and that way you have to stretch it when I'm kneading it. You'll see. But I like that. Okay, now. Yeah, look at that. Now see, I didn't use any oil. I just let the flour or the dough ball roll in its own flour, and it looks great. I'm going to take the rest of the flour that was in the bowl. See, I'm just going to kind of scrape this out. I could use my scraper, I guess. Loosen that up a little. So that's part of my mix, okay? This has still got some of the good stuff in it. The salt and the honey and yeast and all that stuff. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to pour that out right on top of that. So I'm going to work it in. All right, let me set my bowl out of the way. Not going to be using that again. Don't need that either. Okay, that either. All right, now let's get our dough. Now see, oh, that dough feels so nice and fluffy, and I can still work it. Just want to push it out. Oh man, that's nice. I'll do some kneading with it now. You'll see what I'm talking about with that marble in a minute when I start kneading this dough. Oh, it feels so good. See, it wants to stick a little to my hand, but not bad. This dough's still pretty wet. I still got a little bit of that half cup over there in that part. See what I just did? How that stuff I took out of the bottom of that bowl, it worked right into that. Now I'm going to roll this dough around on the board where I have the flour sprinkled when it starts to feel. Just want to get all the flour off the surface. I'm just using it still within the range. I still have this much flour left from the recipe. I'm going to do a little kneading. I don't want to overwork the dough. I want it to just be spongy. I want it to bounce back. You see that? Look at that. See that dough starting to work, bounce back? That's the, oh, and I got some bubbles in it. That's good. The yeast is really, really active. See that big bubble of gas right there? Woo! Yeah, get that gas out of there. Otherwise you'll have hollow spots in your loaf, but boy, that yeast is really going to town. I love the way this loaf is looking. Now I'm going to start, so I'm not going to just knead the devil out of this, because it's going to start working the moisture up. See, that stuck a little to my hand. I'll just flour my hand a little. Now I'm kind of estimating what I have in that, and I won't stay underneath that. I know this much flour on the board and on my hands is not going to hurt this. I mean, I'm not going to exceed, because it might look like there's a lot of flour coming up. There's not. I'm telling you, it's not. I'll go right there where I was, because I'm going to be rolling this in a minute, and I want to make sure it doesn't stick when I roll it. Okay, boy, yeah, that's looking real good. That dough is just bouncing right there. Look at that, man. That gluten is working in there. Okay, we're going to get it rolled out now. Take my roller, sprinkle a little dough, the flour. I always say dough when I mean flour. I don't know why I do that. Okay, put a little flour on your roller. See that this is going to want to spread that way, so that's fine. We'll let her do that. Start in the middle. Now, as soon as this flour starts to spread, work out of that into the dough, and that board gets a little looser, loses some of the dough on the surface, you're going to see that advantage of working on this marble. Now this dough does not want to cooperate right now, because the marble's not grabbing it, but the marble will start to grab it as the flour gets absorbed on the bottom down there. Wait and see. That's what I love about the marble. Watch it. See, it's starting to grab it. The marble's starting to hold it. It wants to resist, though. Sure does. I gotta get it out some more. Gotta work it out of there. Put a little more flour. I'm tempted to put a little more flour on my roller. Away. I'm going to have to put a little flour on the surface. Put flour on my roller. What I have in my mind right now is what I need to do to get this rolled up into a loaf. So what I'm going to do now, I'll pick this up. Oh, it feels real good. I'm gonna pick that up. I'm gonna kind of square this in. I want to get this more of a rectangle so I can roll it over into itself. See, I like the length. I want the length to stay. I'll turn this into a pie almost. Oh yeah, I'm still pushing out gas. Still wants to resist me. Okay, we're going to go ahead and roll this up now into a loaf. I want it to be tight. I want that loaf to be consistent and tight, that way it'll bake evenly. Now I'm going to put a little water. I'm going to put a little water right here on this end because I want this to glue. I don't want that to come loose. I've had that happen, and I don't want it to happen again. So I'm going to put a little more water right there. Take my little brush here that I use for this purpose. I'm going to put a little water along this edge. I want that dough to seal. It got me the last time. I popped loose and it messed up my whole loaf. Just put a little water on there, just like that. I'm going to roll this over onto it. Continue my rolling. And make sure that's right in the middle of that. And then I'm going to take and tuck my end right up underneath, just like that. Got a good seal on the end too. I'm not going to wet that because the dough's kind of wet and sticky on the end, so I don't really need to wet the end. See that? I need to roll that over a little more. I want that dough to set down on that seam. That's right where it's at. It's right on it, right there. I'll let that kind of sit right there on top of that for a minute. I like the shape of that loaf. It's going to be a nice shape on the loaf. Still not over far enough though. Now, I'm going to take a really sharp knife and I'm going to slit the top of that, because if I don't, the dough will split. And I have a knife right here that I keep really, really sharp for that purpose. I'll run it over a few times. I've used. Okay, now we're back and we can see that the bread has risen nicely. It's ready to go in the oven. The oven is preheating, but it's almost ready. So I've decided I am going to go ahead and just put the bread in on the stone while it's cold, or room temperature. But I'm going to paint the egg on there, and that would, having the stone cold, if I heat the stone, I think, before and put the bread on the hot stone, then I think my crust would be burnt by the time the top got done. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go ahead and take this egg that I have prepared, already whisked, and it's a whole egg. So I'm just going to stir that a little bit. I had that in the refrigerator. I used this on a loaf that I had done earlier this morning, and since there was nothing in it, I covered it, put it back in the refrigerator. I know this egg's still good. Just want to fluff it up a little. Okay, now I don't want to paint it on too heavy. I don't want a real heavy, thick crust on the outside. You know, some of my friends don't like the bread to be too crusty. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to paint it really, really light so I can get the colors. You know, I don't want it just real thick on there. In the meantime, my oven's still warming up and the bread's still rising a little. I don't want to put it on real thick. I can see because of the lume cubes that way it's shining on the bread that I'm getting a real thin coat on. That's good. That's all I want. Now in these grooves right here, I'm going to put it a little heavier because I want that to be darker. Don't poke the bread, Jesse. We're so close. I want to make sure I don't mess up now. You know. Yeah, put a little bit more of that egg wash in there. And that'll make that groove nice and dark. Wait and see. And everything else I'll just brush lightly. There we go. Just barely put it on. French bread, because the sugar in the water is going to form a crust anyway. But it won't be what it'll be when you put some egg on there, that's for sure. And this will make the bread turn dark, you know, much quicker on top. So you got to be careful about pulling it out too quick. That's why you want to actually, when you develop a time for your bread, remember at the settings on your oven. Now with my oven, I can tell you this bread's going to be ready probably in about 20 minutes, 25 minutes. But I'm going to watch it closely. I don't walk away from the oven when I get within 5 minutes of my loaf being done. That'd be crazy. Go through all this trouble. I mean, you know, bread, this kind of bread right here, this takes a lot of dedication and love, man. That's why you don't want to waste your ingredients and your time and all that. You want it to be right. Put a little more egg in that groove right there. A little more egg in that one. Put a little more on the end down there. I want this to seal real good. When that egg starts, when that heat hits it, when that gas starts pumping up. And I want over here, I want a real nice seal over here. I want a real nice seal right there. I like to have meditation music playing when I'm making bread. I don't know why. It just seems to go along well with the activity of making bread, listening to meditation music. All right, this is going in the oven. And it's going to be a preheated oven, 375 degrees for 25, 30 minutes. Depends on your oven. You got to watch it. Now with the egg wash on there lightly on top, it's still going to make it brown more than it would if it was just, you know, regular loaf. So, you know, don't let that fool you. So watch your time when you put it in. Set your timer on your oven. I'm going to set my timer for 20 minutes and then I'm going to start watching it after that. And when I pull it out, we'll come back to the video and I'll show it again, okay? All right. Okay, here we are. We're back now. We got our bread out of the oven, and it's looking beautiful. But I'm not sure if it's done. I only had it in there 20 minutes. I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to just thump on the bottom. You can hear that. I'm pretty sure that doesn't sound hollow to me. So I'm going to put it back in the oven, and I'm just going to sit and I'm watch it. I'm going to just keep my eye on it. It might not take more than a couple of minutes, but I'm going to put it back in. Now, I'm going to caution you, if you're ever working and baking on a stone like this, I hate to sound like I'm, trying to be your daddy or something, but this stone will stay hot. I mean hot for a long time, so the bread continues to warm on it and finish and cook and all that. So I'm telling you, always keep your pot handlers or your rags or whatever you're using, but keep them handy, because when you move this thing, you got to use them, okay? We're going to go back in the oven, 375, for at least another 5 minutes, but I'm going to sit right here and watch it. I'm just going to keep my eye on it. I think it still needs to separate inside. And you see I had that hot stone sitting on this wire rack, because if you put that hot stone down on this cold marble, it'll probably crack it. But with the rack up there, you know, it'll be okay. But like I say, don't handle that hot stone, man. I mean, don't try to, just don't forget that the stone is hot. Keep that forefront in your mind, okay, if you use a stone. All right, we'll come back to the video in just a little while. And I want to keep it on while we're doing this.